Welcome back. Well, Dmitry Medvedev's statements are likely to cause yet more tensions between Moscow and Washington. The announcement of US plans to build a missile defense shield in Europe has been a sore point between the two superpowers. Moscow perceived the shield as a direct threat to Russian security. Russia played tough with the US and EU over Kosovo. It used its energy clout at the UN Security Council to try and prevent the republic from declaring independence. And Russia has used its economic muscle to discourage European countries from joining NATO. It's also threatened to disrupt gas supplies to Europe, which buys a quarter of its demands from Russia's giant supplier, Gazprom. Well, joining us again are our guests in Moscow, Sergei Strokhan, in Washington, D.C., Janet McElligott, and in London, Jan Randolph. Janet McElligott in Washington, let me start with you. I mean, this all comes against the backdrop of next month's G8 summit in Japan. How is all of this likely to play out now at the G8? I mean, will Russia be pushing for more financial resurgence?
Well, the truth is, what's perhaps likely to happen, or a possible scenario that I could see happening, is that Russia could push for the euro to become a dominant currency. And the euro is becoming a dominant currency. But I also think behind that, the Russians would like to see the ruble appear on the world stage. But until the rule of man is replaced by the rule of law in Russia, I don't see that happening. In China right now, one of the biggest and best-selling books is called The Currency Wars, and it talks about a conspiracy between Iran, Russia, and interestingly enough, Venezuela, to try and push the dollar down to do just that, replace the dollar as an international currency with the euro, and then the Russians want to push the ruble in. But I don't see that as any kind of likely scenario, anything more than really a wish for further imperialism and really a huge ego on the part of Putin, who probably is the engineer behind this.
OK, let's put that point to Jan Randolph then. I mean, how do you see this all playing out there at the G8 summit? And how do you see Russia using its dominant position perhaps within the energy market to advance its global economic intentions?
Well, it's worrying. Russia's attempt to control energy markets downstream into Europe. This concerns Western European governments. A point about Russia, though, I mean, if you look back, all the former Soviet republics, you know, the Baltics, Ukraine, all these countries are now looking to Western Europe. They want to join the European Union. You know, they want to open up. They're not looking to the Russian Federation. They're not wanting to join the Russian Federation or any kind of economic community around Russia. They voluntarily headed west rather than east. And Russia's got to understand that and mend fences with all its neighbours. It seems to have issues with all its neighbours. Coming to the G8 summit, the Russians obviously are asserting themselves as an energy superpower. They're cash rich, but they cannot really dictate to the rest of the world how to reorder the global economic system. They really haven't. They're not a role model in that respect. They've still got to do an awful lot of work back home.
Sergei Strokhan in Moscow, I mean, how could the current tensions play out regionally? I mean, you know, we've already seen Russia try to use its economic clout to discourage countries like Georgia and Ukraine from joining NATO. I mean, is that going to be the impact we're going to see?
Well, I think when President Medvedev is speaking about ruble turning into a regional reserve currency, this is definitely a clear message to ex-Soviet republics. After the disintegration of the Soviet Union, Moscow repeatedly tried to launch the process of integration at the post-Soviet space. That was not very successful process, and Russia's model turned out not to be very attractive to countries like Georgia and Russia. So now President Medvedev is trying to give a new impetus to the cause of economic integration at the post-Soviet space, which has virtually came to a standstill at the end of the presidency of Vladimir Putin. So this is one of the points of his message. Second thing, of course, is that Russia is trying, it's an open secret that Russia is trying to use oil and gas as a weapon just to make an influence on Ukraine and Georgia, to prevent them from joining NATO, which is considered to be a threat to Russia's security here.
Okay, I want to just widen this out and bring back Janet McElligott there in Washington. I mean, Janet, I want to just ask you how things could look after January 2009. President Bush leaves office then. John McCain, the Republican candidate, said he would favor a harsher approach to Moscow, including perhaps expelling Moscow from the G8. I mean, how do you see things panning out if the Republicans stay in?
Well, hopefully we'll have a president who has his IQ above double digits come January next year, and that can be good for the entire world, whether it's Obama or McCain. And in terms of what McCain says about taking a harsher view with Moscow, that's the only thing that the Russian presidents seem to understand post-Boris Yeltsin. After Glasnost began, there seemed to be a warming up, but there also now is that return to the Cold War. The idea that having only one world superpower is not good internationally, that there is no balance, because the U.S. does have a great military might. We have had a tremendous economic impact. When we catch cold, some countries in the world catch pneumonia, and that isn't good. And we really have to look more globally. Americans, because of how we're geographically situated, with the Atlantic on the eastern shore and the Pacific on the western shore, Canada to the north and Mexico to the south, we've never had to face the economic realities that countries in Europe or the Middle East have. Our neighbors are not a threat to us. We don't have the same realities that you do if you were a Palestinian living in Israel.
Okay, I want to put that point to Jan Randolph in London. I mean, how do you see things panning out under a new U.S. administration? I saw you laughing earlier at Janet McElligott's point about a president with an IQ above double-digit zeros. But I mean, you know, how do you see things panning out? And I mean, can Russia really be a global financial player past, you know, in the next year or so?
Well, as I said, it's got money in the bank, but its banking system isn't up to scratch. I mean, that's the point about Russia. Russia has always fallen short of its not inconsiderable potential. It's always mismanaged its resources under the Soviet system and even under the current system. No, Russia wants to be respected for more than just being a prodigious commodity and energy exporter. And it has the talent, the wealth of human talent to do that. It's always been badly mismanaged. Russia's got to mend fences with its neighbors. It's got to stop acting in a belligerent, bully-like fashion with its neighbors and others. It hasn't yet organized itself, its economic system, in such a way as to inspire and to be attractive to others. It needs to be able to do so. It's not there yet. It's still got a lot of economic development to do. As far as the new presidents are concerned, well, one hopes that they'll get on and they won't be as belligerent as in the past. I mean, the world would be a better place for a stronger Russia, but a more amenable Russia.
Okay.
A Russia that everyone, finds attractive.
Okay, let me get a final thought from Sergei Strokhan in Moscow. Does Russia need to mend fences and stop being a bully?
Well, there's an ongoing debate in Russia here who would be the best option for Russia, John McCain or Barack Obama. And some say that McCain will be really a nightmare with his claims to expel Russia from G8. Others argue that Obama we should not exaggerate also in the ability of Obama to start new sort of relationship with Russia. So, but there is a consensus at the same time that it would be not easy to deal with the new American administration, but at the same time that we would be able to find the consensus through maybe torturous process, through grueling negotiations, but there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay, in fact, that's all we have time for. Sergei Strokhan in Moscow, Janet McElligott in Washington, D.C., and Jan Randolph in London. Thank you all very much indeed for joining us. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We, of course, welcome your comments and your suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From the whole Inside Story team, goodbye for now.